Okay. I don't want that. I want. Okay, so now we'll start with the homage to the Buddha 3 times. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Is it recording? Yes. Okay, we've been reading the Anguttara Nikaya Book of Fours, and we have been in Sutta number 34, which is called the Agga Sutta, the foremost kinds of confidence. And as I mentioned last week, the key word here is pasada. And pasada is a trust directed to a particular object, usually persons considered worthy of trust. And so different people will have different objects of trust, particularly in regard to spiritual teachers, spiritual teachings, spiritual guides. And for the follower of the Buddha Dharma, we have the 3 foremost objects of confidence, that is the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And so last week we explained or went through, first I explained the relationship between confidence and faith, that's pasada and saddha, and we dealt with the Buddha as being the object of the foremost object of confidence. Now we come to the Dhamma as the object of confidence. And here I find the sutta rather interesting and a little bit puzzling, because we would expect the word Dhamma usually as one of the 3 jewels. Usually we take it to be the actual teaching of the Buddha. And so what I would have expected to find here, what would seem to have been, in a way, the logical reading of the text would have been to say something like, to whatever extent there are teachings or doctrines, this is the foremost among them is the Dhamma that is well expounded by the Blessed One. And then those who have confidence in this Dhamma have confidence in the foremost. So if we were taking the 3 jewels in the ordinary sense of taking the Dhamma jewel as the teaching of the Buddha, then we would find the teaching as the foremost, as representing the Dhamma. But here the word Dhamma is being used in a somewhat different way. Another sense of Dhamma is to refer to anything that exists, anything that has any kind of existence is called a Dhamma. And so we have the 5 aggregates are 5 kinds of Dhammas, or actually many kinds of Dhammas within the 5 aggregates. The 6 sense bases are Dhammas. Mental states like thought, reflection are Dhammas. Good qualities or bad qualities like greed, hatred, delusion are Dhammas. The various other defilements are Dhammas. Good qualities like generosity, loving kindness, wisdom, those too are Dhammas. So anything that has any kind of existence is a Dhamma. And here the sutta seems to be using the word Dhamma in that sense, rather than in the sense of a teaching, a religious teaching. And so if we look at the Pali, so it says, to whatever extent there are dhammas that are conditioned. And so all dhammas, all existence, are distinguished into two very broad categories. There are dhammas, or things that are conditioned, and then there are dhammas, or a dhamma, which is unconditioned. And so all things that exist, with one exception, would be comprised under, in the category of conditioned dhammas. And then that one exception, according to the Theravada Abhidhamma, is the unconditioned Dhamma, and that is Nibbana. And so the conditioned Dhammas are all things except Nibbana. Some of the other early Buddhist schools added some other items under the unconditioned, particularly the Sarvastivada school added the space element, in the sense of universal space, all comprising space. But the Theravada school did not accept the space element as being unconditioned, but held that only Nibbana is unconditioned. Okay, so here the sutta is saying that to whatever extent there are phenomena, things that are conditioned, and what is the sort of the defining characteristic of something that is conditioned? What is it that makes something conditioned? Sankata. The word sankata comes from the verb karoti, which means to do or to make, with a prefix sam plus karoti. And the prefix sam gives the sense of together. And when the sound sam meets the K, then often it can turn into this kind of N. And so the verb sankaroti means to make together, to compose, to constitute, to create in unison. And so those things that create in unison are called sankhara. These are, we could say, are conditioning forces, conditioning factors. And those things that result from the operation of the conditioning factors are the Sankata Dhamma. So everything in the world, we could say, is a conditioned Dhamma. So this body is a conditioned Dhamma. Every feeling we experience, a conditioned Dhamma. Every perception, every volition, every thought, every act of consciousness, all those factors of experience are the products of conditioning forces, conditioning factors working together. So they are all conditioned dhammas. And what's characteristic of conditioned dhammas is that they all have an arising a vanishing, and change while they last. We find this also, it's in the Anguttara Nikaya. We had that sutta probably about a year ago. I think it's in the Book of Threes, where the Buddha speaks about 3 characteristics of all conditioned phenomena. All 3 characteristics of the conditioned. An arising is perceived, a vanishing or ceasing is perceived, and the change while they endure is perceived. So anything, even while it's lasting, even if it's lasting just a second, within that second, it's undergoing change. And if we divide the second into 100 parts and examine the entity at 100th of a second, it's undergoing change again. So nothing is stable, nothing is steady, but all conditioned phenomena arise, and at some point they'll vanish. And between arising and vanishing, they undergo change. So that is what makes it a conditioned phenomena. And the opposite, the unconditioned Dhamma, which is Nibbana, has the opposite 3 defining characteristics. There's no arising, no vanishing, no change while it lasts. Okay, so then now coming back to our sutta, it says, to whatever extent there are phenomena that are conditioned, to whatever extent there are phenomena that have arising, vanishing, and that undergo change, the foremost among them is the Noble Eightfold Path. And then it says, those who have confidence in the Noble Eightfold Path have confidence in the foremost. And for those who have confidence in the foremost, the result is foremost. So what is meant here by the Noble Eightfold Path? So we actually speak about the Eightfold Path at 2 levels. There is a level of, we call this the Mundane Eightfold Path. We can also call this the Preliminary Eightfold Path. And then the World Transcending Eightfold Path, which we can also call the path of direct realization. In a way, the contrast between these 2 kinds of Eightfold Paths becomes more explicit in the later Pali literature, particularly in the Abhidhamma and the commentaries. But we could even already see, we could see signs of this already in the suttas. So as followers, serious followers of the Buddha Dhamma, we say that we mold our life on the Noble Eightfold Path, that we use the Noble Eightfold Path as a guide for us in living our life. So what this means in practice, that we hold to a intellectual or conceptual view that corresponds to the right view taught in the suttas. So we have some understanding of the nature of dukkha or suffering, confidence or belief that craving is the cause or origin of suffering. We have belief that it's possible to end craving and reach the end of suffering. And we have confidence that the Eightfold Path is the way to the end of suffering. So this is a right view. And that right view corresponds to the right view taught in the suttas But this is still, for us, it's a conceptual, intellectual right view that we use as a guideline to our practice, to our way of life. Okay, then we see from the text, we know what right thought is, and so we try to develop right thinking, right intentions, right motivations. In our actions in everyday life, we try to follow the principles of right speech, right action. We try to ensure that we are earning our living by a right livelihood. And then in our mental development, we apply right effort to the practice of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, or some kind of practice that falls within the scope of the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And we aspire to attain right concentration, or maybe some amongst us who are very skilled in samadhi are already able to attain the jhanas, and so they have that kind of right concentration. So we say, if we're practicing in that way, that we are practicing the Noble Eightfold Path. But that Eightfold Path that we're practicing is actually, we would call this the Mundane Eightfold Path, or the Preliminary Eightfold Path. So this is a practice that is intended to lead us, to guide us to direct realization of the ultimate truths taught by the Buddha. That is, to the experiential realization of the 4 Noble Truths. And that experiential realization of the 4 Noble Truths only takes place when the mind takes as its direct object nibbana, the unconditioned element. And when there comes that realization of the unconditioned element, then there comes a higher penetrative understanding of all 4 Noble Truths. Because we've experienced and seen that which lies beyond dukkha, we can understand directly that these 5 aggregates subject to clinging are dukkha. We've experienced a moment, an occasion when craving has vanished from the mind, and so we know that craving is the origin of suffering. We've directly realized the cessation of suffering, and we see that it is by the practice of the path that we reach the cessation of suffering. So what takes place in that occasion of realization is the arising of the 8 path factors at an altogether different level, an altogether superior level. And that is the world-transcending Eightfold Path, or what I also call the path of direct realization. And when that path comes to fulfillment, then it brings a state of fruition. And so this will be the fruit, depending on the level of the path, fruit of stream entry, or fruit of once returner, a fruit of non-returner, and at the highest level, the fruit of arhatship. And so it's this world-transcending Eightfold Path, this path of direct realization, that this is the truly Noble Eightfold Path. Here I emphasize the word noble. So this is the path, the Eightfold Path, as developed by those persons who have reached the level of Aryan attainment, who have become Aryan disciples. And so this path that they are developing is the truly noble Eightfold path. And this is the path that in its immediacy, experienced immediacy, is the experience of Nibbana, the unconditioned. And when that path comes to its fulfillment, to its culmination, it brings the complete destruction of all defilements and the attainment of the highest fruit, which is arahatship. So it's said that of all things that are conditioned, the Noble Eightfold Path is the foremost among them. Actually, I think it could also be said that of all conditioned things, the fruit of arahatship is the foremost among them. But I guess for some reason, the Buddha here wants to emphasize the path as the means to the highest fruit. Okay, so this is the first aspect of Dhamma that one takes as the object of confidence. And so it says, those who have confidence in the Noble Eightfold Path have confidence in the foremost. And for those who have confidence in the foremost, the result is foremost. So even if we haven't attained this Noble Eightfold Path yet, the truly noble path of direct realization, just to have confidence, to have trust, to have faith that this is the path to the highest goal, that is an extremely powerful, wholesome state of mind, state of consciousness that generates extremely powerful, wholesome karma, capable of bringing very powerful, beautiful results. Okay, so this is the first stage or first level of confidence in the Dhamma. But now we come to the second level of confidence in the Dhamma. And this is the confidence that is directed not to the conditioned, but to the unconditioned. Since even the Noble Eightfold Path, the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path are conditioned realities. Right view arises, it has an origin, a passing away. Right intentions, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. All 8 of those factors are conditioned, they arise, they persist while we're developing them, then they vanish. And so beyond that, there is a Dhamma which is not subject to the limitations of the conditioned. And so here the text reads, to whatever extent there are dhammas that are conditioned or unconditioned. So in the words of the Pali, yavata dhamma sankatava asankatava. You have to mute again. So to whatever extent there are dhammas, phenomena, conditioned or unconditioned. So the foremost among them here is said to be, the word used is viraga, which we translate dispassion. So the foremost is dispassion. Viraga is declared the chief among them. And then a string of synonyms is used, culminating at the end in nibbana. So these are all, we could say, figurative ways of referring to the ultimate, to Nibbana. So Nibbana is called, it's described as the crushing of pride, the removal of thirst. Because thirst here represents tanha, craving. So it's the ending of craving. Craving understood as thirst. It's the uprooting of attachment. It's the ending of the round of repeated birth and death. Again, it's called the destruction of craving, tanha kayo. Again, it's called viraga, dispassion. Then it's called nirodha, cessation. And finally, it comes in its own name, that is nibbana. And it might be thought when you see dispassion, crushing of pride, removal of thirst, the uprooting of attachment, this might seem, if you look at it, you might think that nibbana is just the ending of passion, just the removal of thirst, just the event by which one uproots attachment. And in that case, it seems nibbana would be a conditioned thing, because then it has a beginning. You know, when you have craving, then you destroy craving. So there's a beginning to the destruction of craving. And in that state in which craving is destroyed, there's constant change. And so you might think nibbana is a conditioned Dhamma. But the way the commentaries explain this, and I agree with them here, that all of these other expressions that are used to describe nibbana are, in a sense, metaphorical expressions to show what has to be done in order to attain nibbana. Nibbana itself is unconditioned. It's without any origin, without any production, without any change, without any vanishing or disappearance. It's said to be unproduced, it's deathless, it's an unconditioned state beyond the cycle of birth and death. But in order to achieve Nibbana, to attain Nibbana, what one has to do is eliminate raga, eliminate lust, passion, to crush one's pride or vanity, to uproot or to remove the thirst of craving, to uproot attachment, to end the cycle of birth and death, again to destroy craving, to bring about dispassion, to reach the cessation of this process of repeated existence. And when all of that is done, then there comes the attainment of Nibbana. And so Nibbana, the unconditioned, is held to be the foremost among all Dhammas, conditioned or unconditioned. And so those who have confidence in the Dhamma, those who have confidence in Nibbana as the foremost of all Dhammas, they have confidence in the foremost. And for those who have confidence in the foremost, the result is foremost. Well, I see that there's actually an error here, which I'll have to correct. It should be those who have confidence in the Dhamma, which is this passion. They have confidence in the foremost. And for those who have confidence in the foremost, the result is foremost. So how is the result foremost? First, as I said, when you have confidence in the Dhamma of Nibbana, even if you haven't realized it yourself, but you're still placing your trust, your devotion, your faith in the ultimate, highest goal of human existence. And that state of mind, which is accompanied by that confidence, becomes an extremely pure, powerful, wholesome state of mind that generates very powerful, wholesome karma. And that karma, when it produces its result, it will produce both the worldly result, that is a result that's visible here and now, long lifespan, good health, contact with good friends, and so forth, all of the desirable mundane goods, and also that karmic, wholesome karma generated through that act of confidence becomes a strong supporting condition for the ultimate attainment of Nibbana for oneself, by oneself. And so it becomes a supporting condition for the attainment of the world transcending path and the realization of the world transcending fruit. Okay, so in that way, this confidence in the Dhamma of dispassion, in Nibbana as the supreme Dhamma, becomes a confidence in the foremost, bringing the foremost results. Okay, now we move next to the third jewel, and this will be confidence in the Sangha. And the word Sangha was used in the Buddha's time, that not exclusively, it was not referring exclusively to the company or community of the Buddha's disciples, the Buddha's followers, but it was used in a very broad sense to refer to any kind of community, any kind of group. So we even come across in the texts, I think I've seen Deva Sangha. So this would be a group of deities, a community of deities. And there's the word Gana Sangha was used to refer in that period to the small tribal republics. For example, the Lichavis, who were living in the Vajji Confederacy, they constituted a tribal republic. And the Buddha's own relatives, the Sakyans, were a tribal republic. The Lichavis, the Sakyans, the Videha, that was another region. So all of these little tribal republics were called Gana Sangha. And I've even come across in the suttas the expression Miga Sangha. Miga means deer. And so a group of deer is a Miga Sangha. So when you come to Tuangyan Monastery, sometimes we see a group of 4 or 5 deer here grazing in the woods or roaming through the woods. We could say that that is a Miga Sangha, a community of deer. But the word Sangha had a special, more specialized meaning to refer to the groups of disciples that would gather around a religious or spiritual teacher. And so there were other spiritual teachers contemporary with the Buddha, like the leader of the Jains. This is called, in the Buddhist text, called the Niganta Nataputta. The Jains themselves call him Mahavira. There was Ajita Kesakambali. There was Pakuta Kachayana. Makali Gosala. So there were these famous eminent teachers, and each one would attract disciples who would become their followers. And each of those groups were called a Sangha, or sometimes the word used is Gana, a group. And so the text here is saying that to whatever extent there are these Sanghas or groups, the foremost among them is the Sangha of the Tathagata's disciples. Let's see exactly the way that is phrased in the Pali. The expression used is Tathagata Savaka Sangho. So these are the true disciples of the Buddha, and we're going to see what exactly is intended by that expression. So it said, to whatever extent there are sanghas or groups, the Sangha of the Tathagata's disciples is declared the foremost among them. And notice it's not saying the Bhikkhu Sangha, the order of monks, also including nuns, Bhikkhu, Bhikkhuni Sangha, but it's the Savaka Sangha, the true disciples. And this is specified to be the 4 pairs of persons, the 8 types of individuals. So who are these 4 pairs which make 8 types? So we have 4 basic stages. The stage of stream entry, which is the lowest stage, where one has entered the stream of the Dhamma, heading irreversibly to Nibbana. And so the stream enterer is one who has cut off the coarsest defilements and has at most 7 more existences, either in the human realm or in the heavenly realms. The stream enterer is forever liberated from the prospect of rebirth in the hells, the animal realm, or in the realm of the hungry ghosts. So that's the stream enterer. There's the once returner. The once returner doesn't cut off any new defilements, but weakens greed, hatred, and delusion to such an extent that they have only one more rebirth, either in this world or in a heavenly realm. Actually, they can be reborn even 2 times, since they can go from the human realm to the heavenly realm, then come back to the human realm. Or if they reach the attainment in the heavenly realm, they can go from the heavenly realm to the human realm and back to the heavenly realm. But they don't take more than 2 more rebirths within the samsara. Okay, then advancing further, they reach the 3rd stage of realization, where they cut off 5 defilements, including sensual lust and ill will. And those are the defilements or fetters that bind us to the sense, to the desire realm of existence. So when those 2 defilements are eliminated, then one is no more bound to the desire realm, but one takes rebirth in the form realm, or possibly the formless realm, and reaches final liberation there. And then the 4th stage of realization is that of arhatship. The arhat is the one who eradicates all defilements to the full extent, and thereby becomes completely liberated from the prospect of birth and death. No more subject to rebirth anywhere. So those are the 4 stages of attainment, and leading to each of those 4 stages there is an irreversible path. There's a certain, one reaches a certain point where one is bound to attain the fruition stage, where the path arises within one's mind, the factors of the path arise, leading one irreversibly directly to the attainment of the corresponding fruit. And so when we take this distinction of path and fruit for the 4 stages, we have 4 pairs: the attainer, the one who reaches the path, and the one who realizes the fruit at the 4 levels. And then if we take those persons individually, we have 8 types of individuals. Okay, so those 8 types of individuals, or the grouped into 4 pairs, those are the true savakas, the true disciples of the Tathagata. And together, in their totality, they constitute the Sangha of the Blessed One's disciples. And here, an explicit distinction is not made whether they are lay disciples or monastic disciples. It seems that anyone who reaches the paths and fruits becomes part of the Savaka Sangha, the Tathagata Savaka Sangha, the Sangha of the Buddha's true noble disciples. And this Sangha, it's not the individuals as such, but it's the community as such that is said to be worthy of gifts, worthy of hospitality, worthy of offerings. Here we have 3 terms, but I have to say, I don't see a clear distinction between the first and the third of these. It seems that these were Brahminic terms that the Buddha took over. So it said that the Brahmins, because the Brahmins would try to put themselves at the top of the social order, and because they performed the sacrifices for the lay people, for householders, lay people would support the Brahmins with gifts and offerings. And so the Brahmins are said to be Pahuneo, worthy of gifts, and Dakineo, worthy of offerings. And the Buddha took those terms over and applied them to his Sangha of disciples. And then comes Pahuneo, which is what we translate as worthy of hospitality. You know, years ago when I was in Sri Lanka, I saw that there was a Sri Lankan monk who translated this expression, worthy of hospitality. He translated it as worthy of hospitalization. But that's not what's intended here. But worthy of being treated with respect and with kindness and with helpfulness. Okay, so, and then we have worthy of reverential salutation. So what's meant by reverential salutation, the Pali word, also the same in Sanskrit, is Anjali. So this is joining the palms and putting the palms up to the forehead. So that's worthy of reverential salutation. And then the Sangha is called the unsurpassed field of merit for the world. Because people within the social structure of India in the Buddha's time, people would make offerings to those who were considered renunciants, models of spiritual excellence, with the idea that by making gifts and offering support to these models of spiritual achievement, one generates merit, wholesome karma that will produce good results in the future, beneficial results in the future. And so for the followers of Brahmanism, the Brahmins are considered the field of merit. For the followers of the other spiritual systems, the renunciants of those systems are considered the unsurpassed field of merit. And for the Buddha's teaching, it is within the scope of the Buddha's teaching, it is this Sangha of the Blessed One's disciples, the Savaka Sangha, that is considered the unsurpassed field of merit for the whole world. And so those who have confidence, trust, faith, devotion to the Sangha, they have confidence in the foremost. And for those who have confidence in the foremost, the result is foremost. Okay, before I take questions, we could just take a quick look through the verses, see if there's anything interesting in the verses, anything new. Okay, so it begins by saying, for those confident in regard to the foremost, knowing the foremost Dhamma. That's actually interesting, because this seems to be implying that line, that the one who has confidence is not just an ordinary person, but knowing the foremost Dhamma. The foremost Dhamma would be the Dhamma of Nibbana, or knowing the foremost Dhamma of the Four Noble Truths. So you could see the Pali says, Agang Dhammang Vijanatang. So Vijanatang, for those knowing, Agang Dhammang, the foremost or supreme Dhamma. So they are confident in the Buddha who is said to be the foremost, and then he's further described as unsurpassed, that is amongst all persons he's unsurpassed, and worthy of offerings, dakkineye. Okay, then we have the Dhamma for those confident in the foremost Dhamma. And then the foremost Dhamma is described as virage upasame. So it's dispassion, which is the state of peace. Or maybe we could say the peace of dispassion. And that is described as sukhe, as blissful. So notice when the verse speaks about confidence in the Dhamma, it doesn't mention the Noble Eightfold Path, but it mentions only the Dhamma of dispassion, which is Nibbana. And then for those confident in the foremost Sangha, again, the Sangha is described as the unsurpassed field of merit. So for those giving gifts to the foremost, that is, one gives gifts to the Buddha and to the Sangha, one generates the foremost merit, and that merit leads to these mundane results of a long lifespan, beauty, glory, a good reputation, happiness, and strength. So those are the mundane benefits of this merit. But as I said earlier, this merit also becomes a supporting condition for the attainment of the supramundane or world transcending benefit, which is the achievement of the paths, fruits, and nibbana. So then the verse continues and it says, for the wise person who gives to the foremost, who is agadhamma samahito. So this is concentrated upon the foremost Dhamma. So the mind might be focused upon the path or upon Nibbana, not in the sense that one is actually absorbed in samadhi at that time, but that is the ideal, the goal, the objective, or the objective aspiration on which one focuses the mind. Then it says, having become a deva or a human being. So this shows the rebirth that results from that merit. Deva Bhuto Manuso Va. So either as a human being or in the next life, when one becomes a deva, if one is reborn as a deity, one rejoices having attained the foremost. And so the expression used here, agapato, that one has attained the foremost. So this seems to be implying, if I understand it, that as a deva or a human being, one attains nibbana, which is the foremost, and thereby one rejoices. Well, maybe that's a narrow reading of the sutta. Maybe there's a broader reading that one attains the foremost, I don't know, the foremost kind of rebirth and one rejoices. Different interpretations are possible. Okay, let's see if there's any questions. So I have to see if people have their hands raised. I see. Let's see if I could. Poe, not Poe, there was Po. The hand is dropped. Okay, so then I see Ulysses, and I'm going to unmute. Okay, Ulysses, you can speak.
Yes, in regards to the 8 types of individuals, I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about those who are attaining and those who are realizing. Like what is the intrinsic difference, or if there's any difference, how would you describe them?
I'll just try to put it simply here, not to go into details.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, for the one who is a path attainer, they have entered upon that irreversible path, the path that is going to lead them to the fruit. So by entering upon the path, they acquire the right view, right intention, right speech, right action, and so forth, up to right concentration. All of these are directed towards the fruit that lies ahead, but they still have to cultivate those path factors further. And so they are engaged in the cultivation, the practice of those path factors. And when those path factors, when that cultivation of the path reaches its culmination, then it brings the eradication, the elimination of those defilements that are obstructing the attainment of the fruit. And so the defilements are then eliminated, and the practitioner then enters upon the fruit and enjoys the freedom from those defilements that are entailed by the attainment of the fruit. Okay, so that's a very simple way of characterizing the distinction. Okay, we can go to the next question. This is Ravisara.
Yes, Bhante, thank you. It's actually a variation of the same question asked by the gentleman earlier. So when you take the 4 pairs of individuals, if you consider the first pair and the first one in the first pair, like the person who's trying to attain stream entry, how would one know, say one is, whether one is a noble being of the first type, you know, how do you know whether you're definitely destined to be a stream enterer? Like, how can you tell that like from practical point of view?
How can one tell whether one is a stream enterer?
No, Bhante,
Whether one is on the path to stream
on the path, yes. Yeah. Because he's also a noble being, isn't it? Like,
yeah, he's a noble being.
How would you tell that?
I don't find in the text a very clear-cut, unambiguous way to tell that one has entered the path. And so I would assume that one undergoes a particular very momentous, transformative experience that gives one the sense that one is now on the path, moving towards the fruit. But also I believe it's possible for people to be mistaken about their experience. Somebody might have a powerful experience in meditation and think, that's the attainment of the path. And so I think one can be mistaken about one's experience. So I don't know an absolutely clear, unambiguous criterion for determining one is on the path.
But in Abhidhamma, it's maintained that the first type of noble being only exists for one mind moment. What are your thoughts about that, Bhante?
Yeah, I didn't want to get into that because it becomes a big issue, which takes a lot of time. But there is clearly a distinction between the viewpoint of the Abhidhamma and the viewpoint or perspective of the suttas. From the suttas, it seems that one is on the path for an extended period of time.
Okay, Bhante, thank you
So
very
there are
much.
problems in reconciling them, and I have some thoughts about those, but to explain those would take a lot of time, and I see a lot of hands up, so we have to give other people. Okay, so
thank you very much.
Okay, Po A Lung, is that?
That GOH go at the end. Poiling go.
Polingo, okay.
Yes. All right. Okay. Good morning, Bhante.
Good morning.
I have two questions. The first question is actually related to Tathagata Savaka Sangho, related to the third category of people, the ones returner. I always have this questions.
Yeah.
When they die, they go to the Arupa Jhana or Arupa realm, and is it equivalent to where the Pure Land was saying on the Mahayana regarding the Amitabha is staying? Is that the realm of Amitabha? Could
Okay.
you confirm that?
Okay, so you're speaking about the non-returner.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
The non-returner, the third category.
Okay. So in the Pali Nikayas, there's no mention of a Pure Land of Amitabha. So one who becomes a non-returner in the Nikayas is no longer to be reborn in the desire realm, but takes rebirth in the form realm, and then remains in the form realm and attains final liberation there. Okay,
Formless realm or form realm?
Excuse me?
Formless? Is it in the formless, the Arupa Jhana, the
No.
Arupa realm? In the form, the
No,
central
generally
form.
it's the form realm. So I would assume, though, that a non-returner who as a human being attains the formless jhanas will be reborn in the formless realm and attain final liberation from the formless realm. But the general rule, I think, is attaining it from the form realm.
Right. The follow-up question is that I have another questions in regards to the Parinirvana Sutta, where the Buddha actually went up to the Arupa Jhana, entered the Arupa Jhana and come down,
Yeah.
and then ascend via the fourth jhana.
Right.
Why would the Buddha actually going up and coming down and going to jhana 1 and then again climb up to 1, 2, 3, 4 and ascend from jhana number 4? What was the reason? Would you be able to kindly explain that? Any idea?
I'm thinking we should ask the Buddha about that.
Right.
But he's God. He's in Nirvana. Buddha, come back from Nirvana and tell us why.
So, the Arunta basically was telling Ananda. So when I read that, the Parinirvana Sutta, I just very puzzled. Why would he going through a yo-yo way of exit and get into Parinirvana?
Yeah, I don't know, actually. I just don't know the answer.
Okay, thank you. Yes. Can I ask another question? It's actually related to paragraph number 3.
Wait, let me just see
of,
how many questioning
yes.
people
Sorry.
there are. Okay, if it could be answered quickly.
Yeah, the translation that they say the crushing of pride and that the remover of thirst and later is the termination of the round.
Yeah.
It's just like a bit out of the place. How can you terminate the rebirth? How can one, when you at that stage, like at the end of your life, and your mind, you basically cannot control, how can you terminate the rebirth?
Well, what it's saying is that Nibbana itself is the termination of the round of rebirths.
Okay, right.
Yeah,
Okay, I got
that
it.
is the sense.
Okay, right. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks
So
very
let's
much.
go to HDM.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Bhante, for your teaching. I have a question about the distinction between the mundane and super mundane path. Is there a possible danger here when we sort of open the door to erect the wall between the two? It seems in many suttas there's a more gradual, going down the path, deepening. Like, for example, in your anthology, you have the Kanki Sutta, where the Buddha talks to Kapatika, and where he emphasizes how you go from preservation of truth to discovery of truth to final arrival at truth.
Yeah.
And one of the key points is knowing with the body these. And it seems to me, as we walk down the path and make right effort and right intention, we inevitably at some point will sort of, ease our way into the super mundane dimension. Would that be correct?
Oh yeah, that's certainly correct. That as one practices, we call it the mundane path, but that's like a technical designation. But there are different levels of depth and strength in the mundane Eightfold Path. And so it's as you go along the Eightfold Path, especially developing samadhi and panya, concentration and wisdom, as they get stronger and stronger, then one is getting closer and closer to the supramundane or the world transcending path. But then there's said to be like a certain threshold, sort of still separating the highest level of the mundane path from the world transcending path. So one goes deeper and deeper into the mundane path, and then especially when the wisdom and concentration is strong enough, then one jumps over that threshold and one touches the world transcending path.
Mm. Well, I'm just asking because it seems there's the potential for this distinction to sort of have a bit of a chilling effect on the practitioner.
It shouldn't.
A chilling effect,
Yeah.
where one kind of dismisses the possibility that one ever gets to the super mundane.
No, if one understands the Dharma correctly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So, Sio, let me unmute. Okay, you're open.
Okay, hi, Bhante.
Hi.
I maybe this is a little bit of a theoretical question, but I always had this trouble understanding when we say Nibbana has that non-vanishing quality.
Yeah.
Because then we, even today, you mentioned that if the stream enterer enters Nibbana, and if it is not vanishing, how would one really come out of it? And a stream enterer, if it's not like the moment they touch Nibbana, it never vanished again.
Okay, say the stream enterer experiences Nibbana, but this doesn't mean that the experience of Nibbana is permanent or everlasting. The experience of Nibbana is a conditioned Dhamma. So it has an arising and a vanishing. But Nibbana itself doesn't vanish. Let me just use an analogy. Let me say, okay, the Empire State Building, let us say that represents Nibbana. And I'm a visitor to New York. I've never been to New York before. And so I go and visit the Empire State Building, and I take the special elevator up to the top of the Empire State Building. So I go up come down, and then I go back and go to see some other sites in the city. So I come and go from the Empire State Building, but the Empire State Building remains there. So the Empire State Building is like Nibbana, but my visit to the Empire State Building is like the attainment of stream entry. Of course, the Empire State Building will eventually vanish when, I don't know, at some point, maybe when this planet vanishes. So it's just a rough simile.
Yeah, I've also heard that simile of a person coming on a desert, parched, and they see this well and they see water in the bottom and they say, ah, water. And it's like the stream mentor experiencing Nibbana. I saw that in the sutta.
Yeah.
Bhante, so is an arahant actually reaching Nibbana for good the moment they achieve arahanthood?
You could say that the arhat never falls away from arhatship. They've destroyed greed, hatred, and delusion. They've destroyed the asavas. And so the defilements never arise again. So the arhat is always preserves their arhatship, but they are not always absorbed in the actual experience of the unconditioned nibbana. They have access to a special meditative attainment in which they can directly experience nibbana, but they don't remain all the time in that meditative experience.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, now we'll have to take the last question. This will be Jie Tang.
Hi, Bhante. Thanks for taking my question. I have a simple question. I know the time. So is there any online dictionary for Pali and English?
I believe
or
that
even
the
Chinese?
Pali
Because
English
I tried to
dictionary,
Google it.
I believe the Pali English dictionary is is available online. And that's a rather large, complex dictionary. I think there's also Buddhadatta's. Maybe it's called the Concise Pali English Dictionary. Does anybody know of that? If you do, you can unmute yourself and speak. Okay, I think then we will end for the day. Unless there's any more questions, we have a few more.
I have one more question, if you don't mind. What about the notes that you're writing? Are you gonna post it in like a Google teaching group or online?
These little notes?
The notes you're writing, like in the class, will all these be saved in the folder of somewhere, or that we can read?
I could do that, but let's see if there's anything really interesting here.
Someday, all of your notes will be recorded. So if people go back to the YouTube recording, they will see all them.
Okay.
Can these note file be attached to the recording? Well, I'll find some way to try to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so let us end for the day by doing the sharing of the merits. Let me find the verse.
Bhante?
Yeah.
Bhante, may I share an online dictionary for Pali, please?
Actually, I found it.
Yeah,
actually,
please.
I found it. Yeah.
Okay, so there's a dictionary.sutta.org.
Thank you.
Okay, so let us recite these verses for sharing the blessings, for sharing the merits. Akasata Jabumata Deva Naga Mahidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Sasanang Akasata Jabumata Deva Naga Mahidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Desanang Akasata Jabumata Deva Naga Mahidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Mang Parang Etavata Cham Hehi Sampadang Punya Sampadang Sabbe Deva Anumodantu Sabba Sampati Siddhya Etavata Cham Hehi Sampadang Punya Sampadang Sabbe Bhuta Anumodantu Sabba Sampati Siddhya Etavata Cham Hehi Sampadang Punya Sampadang Sabbe Sata Anumodantu Sabba Sampati Siddhya Bhavagupadaya Vici Hetato Etantare Satakayupapanna Rupya Rupicha Asanya Sanino Dukha Pamuchantu Pusantu Nibuting. Okay, then everybody says sadhu, sadhu,
Sadhu, Bhante. Thank you very much.
Sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you,
Okay, so
Bhante.
wait, before you end, before we end.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, before we end, I just want to remind everybody that we have group meditation over the same, the BAUS website. On Sunday evening from 7 to 8 p.m., we'll have group meditation led by Bhante Mangala. And then on Wednesday evenings, again from 7 to 8 p.m., we have group meditation that I will lead. So please, if it's convenient for you, please join us over the same, it's the same Zoom meeting room. And you'll find all of the information on the website of the Buddhist Association of the United States. Okay, so thank you all for joining.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bhante.
Sadhu,
Thank you,
Bhante.
Bhante.
Okay,
Thank you, Bhante.
okay,
Thank you.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
okay, so I'm going to end the recording.